Hello everybody. Welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra, and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story. So, sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea. Tonight we start Kathryn Lasky's The Capture, the first book in the Guardians of Ga'Hoole series. Prologue. The world spiraled, the needles of the old fir tree blurred against the night sky, and then there was a sickening sensation as the forest floor raced toward him. Soren madly tried to beat his stubby little wings. Useless, he thought. I'm dead. A dead owlet. 3 weeks out of the shell and my life ends here. Suddenly, something began to soften his fall. A pocket of breeze, a cushion of wind, a downy fluff of air lacing through his unsightly patches of fuzz. What was it? Time slowed. His short life flowed by him, every second of it from his very first memory. Chapter 1. A Nest Remembered. Noctis, can you spare a bit more down, darling? I think our third little one is about to arrive. That egg is beginning to crack. Not again, sighed Clud. What do you mean, Clud, not again? Don't you want another little brother? His father said. There was an edge to his voice. Or sister, his mother sighed, the low, soft whistle barn owls sometimes use. I'd like a sister, Soren peeped up. You just hatched out 2 weeks ago. Clud turned to Soren, his younger brother. What do you know about sisters? Maybe, Soren thought to himself, they would be better than brothers. Clud seemed to have resented him since the moment he had first hatched. You really wouldn't want them arriving just when you're about to begin branching, Clud said dully. Branching was the first step, literally, towards flight. The young owlets would begin their hopping from branch to branch and flapping their wings. Now, Clud, his father admonished. Don't be impatient. There'll be time for branching. Remember, you won't have your flight feathers for at least another month or more. Soren was just about to ask what a month was when he heard a crack. The owl family all seemed to freeze. To any other forest creature, the sound would have been imperceptible, but barn owls were blessed with extraordinary hearing. It's coming, Soren's mother gasped. I'm so excited. She sighed again and looked rapturously at the pure white egg as it rocked back and forth. A tiny hole appeared, and from it protruded a small spur. It's Egg-tooth, by Glucks, Soren's father exclaimed. Mine was bigger, wasn't it, Dad? Clud shoved Soren aside for a better look, but Soren crept back up under his father's wing. Oh, I don't know, son, but it's a pretty glistening little point. Always gives me a thrill. Such a tiny little thing pecking its way into the big wide world. Ah, bless my gizzard, the wonder of it all. It did indeed seem a wonder. Soren stared at the hole that now began to split into 2 or 3 cracks. The egg shuddered slightly, and the cracks grew longer and wider. He had done this himself just 2 weeks ago. This was exciting. What happened to my egg tooth, Mum? It dropped off, stupid, Clud said. Oh, Soren said quietly. His parents were so absorbed in the hatching that they didn't reprimand Clud for his rudeness. Where's Miss P? Miss P? His mother said urgently. Right here, ma'am. Miss Plither, the old blind snake who had been with the owl family for years and years, slithered into the hollow. Blind snakes, born without eyes, served as nest maids and were kept by many owls to make sure the nests were clean and free of maggots and various insects that found their way into the hollows. Miss P, no maggots or vermin in that corner where Noctis put in fresh down? Of course not, ma'am. Now, how many broods of owlets have I been through with you? Oh, sorry, Miss P. How could I have ever doubted you? I'm always nervous at the hatching. Each one is just like the first time. I never get used to it. Don't you apologize, ma'am. You think any other birds would care 2 whits if their nest was clean? The stories I've heard about seagulls, oh my goodness. Well, I won't even go into it. Blind snakes prided themselves on working for owls, whom they considered the noblest of birds. Meticulous, the blind snakes had great disdain for other birds that they felt were less clean due to their unfortunate digestive processes that caused them to eliminate only sloppy wet droppings instead of nice neat bundles, the pellets that owls yarked or spit up. Although owls did digest the soft parts of their food in a manner similar to other birds, and indeed passed it in a liquid form, for some reason they were never associated with these lesser digestive processes. All the fur and bones and tiny teeth of their prey, like mice, that could not be digested in an ordinary way, were pressed into little pellets just the shape and size of the owl's gizzard. Several hours after eating, the owls would yarp them up. Wet poopers is how many nest-made snakes referred to other birds. Of course, Miss Plithiver was much too proper to use such coarse language. "Mum," Soren gasped, "look at that!" The nest suddenly seemed to reverberate with a huge cracking sound. Again, only huge the ear slits of barn owls. Now the egg split. A pale, slimy blob flopped out. "It's a girl!" A long shriek call streamed from his mother's throat. It was the shriek of pure happiness. "Adorable!" Soren's mother sighed. "Enchanting," said Soren's father. Clud yawned, and Soren stared dumbfounded at the wet, naked thing, with its huge, bulging eyes sealed tightly shut. "What's wrong with her head, Mum?" Soren asked. "Nothing, dear. Chicks have very large heads. It takes a while for their bodies to catch up. Not to mention their brains," Clud muttered. So they can't hold their heads up right away?" "So they can't hold their heads up right away," said his mother. "You were the same way." "What shall we call the little dear?" Soren's father asked. "Eglantine," Soren's mother replied immediately. "I've always wanted a little Eglantine." "Oh, Mum, I love that name," Soren said. He softly repeated the name. Then he tipped toward the little pulsing mass of white. "Eglantine," he whispered softly, and he thought he saw one little sealed eye open just a slit, and a tiny voice seemed to say, "Hi." Soren loved his little sister immediately. 1 second, Eglantine had been this quivering little wet blob, and then minutes later, it seemed as if she had turned into a fluffy white ball of down. She grew stronger quickly, or so it appeared to Soren. His parents assured him that he, too, had done exactly the same. That evening, it was time for her first insect ceremony. Her eyes were fully open, and she was bawling with hunger. Eglantine could hardly make it through her father's welcome to Tyto speech. "Little Eglantine, welcome to the forest of Tyto, forest of the barn owls, or Tyto Alba, as we are more formally known. Once upon a time, long, long ago, we did indeed live in barns, but now we and other Tyto cousins live in the forest kingdom known as Tyto. We are rare indeed, and we are perhaps the smallest of all the owl kingdoms, although in truth it has been a long, long time since we had a king. Some day, when you grow up, when you enter your second year, you, too, will fly out from this hollow, and find one of your own in which to live in with a mate." This was the part of the speech that amazed and disturbed Soren. He simply could not imagine growing up and having a nest of his own. How could he be separated from his parents? And yet there was this huge urge to fly, even now with his stubby little wings that lacked even the smallest sign of true flight feathers. "And now," Soren's father continued, "it is time for your first insect ceremony." He turned to Soren's mother. "Marilla, my dear, can you bring forward the cricket?" Soren's mother stepped up. In her beak she held one of the summer's last crickets. "Eat up, young'un. Head first. Yes, down the beak. Yes, always head first. That's the proper way, be it cricket, mouse, or vole." Sighed Soren's father as he watched his daughter swallow the cricket. "Dizzy and the gizzy, ain't it so?" Clud blinked and yawned. Sometimes his parents really embarrassed him, especially with Da with his stupid jokes. Wit of the woods, muttered Clud. That dawn, after the owls had settled down, Soren was still so excited by his little sister's arrival that he could not sleep. His parents had retired to the ledge above him where they slept, but he could hear their voices threading through the dim morning light that filtered into the hollow. "Oh, Noctis, it is very strange. Another owlet disappeared." "Yes, my dear, I'm afraid so." "How many is that now in the last few days?" 15 missing, I believe." "That is many more than can be accounted for by raccoons." "Yes," Noctis replied grimly. "And there is something else." "What?" his wife replied in a lower wavering hoot. "Eggs." "Eggs?" "Eggs have disappeared." "Eggs from a nest?" "Yes, I'm afraid so." "No!" Marilla Alba gasped. "I have never heard of such a thing. It's unspeakable." "I thought I must tell you in case we are blessed with another brood." "Oh, great Glocks!" his mother gasped. Soren's eyes blinked wide. He had never heard his mother swear before. But we so seldom leave the nest during broody times. Whoever it is must watch us." She paused. "Watch us constantly." "Whoever it is can fly or climb," Noctis Alba said darkly. Soren felt a sense of dread seep into the hollow. How thankful he was that Eglantine had not been snatched while just an egg. He vowed he would never leave her alone. It seemed to Soren that as soon as Eglantine ate her first insect, she never stopped eating. His mother and father assured him that he had been the same. "And you still are, Soren. It's almost time for your first fur-on-meat ceremony." That was what life was like for those first weeks in the nest, one ceremony after another. Each, it seemed in some way or another, led to the truly biggest, perhaps most solemn yet joyous moment in a young owl's life, first flight. "Fur," whispered Soren. He couldn't quite imagine what it was like, what it would feel like slipping down his throat. His mother always stripped off all the fur from the meat and then tore out the bones before offering the little tidbits of fresh mouse or squirrel to Soren. Clud was already ready for his first bone ceremony when he would be allowed to eat the whole bit, as Soren's father said, and it was just before first bones that a young owl began branching. And just after that, it would begin its first real flight under the watchful eyes of its parents. "Hop, hop, that's it, Clud. Now up with the wings, just as you begin the hop to the next branch. And remember, you are just branching now, no flying, and even after your first flight lessons, no flying by yourself until Mum and I say so." "Yes, Da," Clud said in a bored voice. Then he muttered, "How many times have I heard this lecture?" Soren had heard it many, many times too, even though he was nowhere near branching. The worst thing a young owl could do was try to fly before it was ready. And of course, young owls usually did this when their parents were out hunting. It was so tempting to try one's newly fledged wings, but it would most likely end in a disastrous crash, leaving the little owlet nestless, perhaps badly injured, and on the ground exposed to dangerous predators. The lecture was brief this time, and the branching lesson resumed. "Crisply, crisply, boy, keep the noise down. Owls are silent flyers." "But I'm not flying yet, Da, as you keep reminding me constantly." "What's it matter if I'm noisy now when I'm just branching? Bad habit, bad habit. Leads to noisy flight. Hard to outgrow noise habits starting in branching." "Oh, bother." "Oh, I'll bother you," Noctis exploded, and gave his son a cuff on the head that nearly tipped him over. Soren had to admit that Clud didn't even whimper, but he just picked himself up and gave his dad a glaring look and resumed hopping, slightly less noisily than before. There was a series of soft, short hisses from Miss Plidiver. "Difficult one, that one. My, glad your mum's not here to see this. Eglantine," Miss Plidiver called out suddenly. Even though she was blind, she seemed to know exactly what the young owlets were doing at any given moment. She now heard the crunch of a nest bug in Eglantine's beak. "Put that nest bug down. Owls do not eat nest bugs. That's what house snakes do. If you keep it up, you'll grow fat and squishy and won't be prepared for your first meat ceremony. And then no first fur, and then no first bones, and then no, well, you know what. Now your mum is just out looking for a nice chubby vole with soft fur for Soren's first fur ceremony, and she might even find a nice wriggly little centipede for you." Oh, they're so much fun to eat, Soren exclaimed, all their little legs pittering down your gullet. Oh, Soren, tell me that story about the first time you ate a centipede, Eglantine begged. Miss Plithiver sighed softly. It was so sweet. Eglantine hung on every word of Soren's. True sisterly love, and Soren loved her right back. She wasn't sure what exactly had happened with their older brother Clud. There was always one difficult one in the brood, but Clud was more than just difficult. There was something, Miss Plithiver thought hard. Just something missing with Clud. Something rather unnatural, un-owlish. Sing the centipede song, Soren, sing it! Soren opened his beak wide and began to sing. What gives a wriggle and makes you giggle when you eat 'em? Whose weensy little feet make my heart really beat? Why, it's those little creepy crawlies that make me feel so jolly. For the darling centipede, my favorite buggy feed, I'll always want some more. That's the insect I adore. More than beetles, more than crickets, which at times gives me the hiccups. I crave only to feed on a juicy centipede, and I shall be happy forevermore. Just as Soren finished the song, his mother flew into the hollow and dropped a vole at her feet. A nice fat one, my dear. Enough for your first fur ceremony and Clud's first bones. I want my own, Clud said. Nonsense, dear. You can never eat a whole vole. Whole vole, squeaked Eglantine. Oh, Mom, it rhymes. I love rhymes. I want one all for myself, Clud persisted. Now look here, Clud, Marilla fixed her son in a dark, steady gaze. We do not waste food around here. This is a very large vole. There is enough for you to have your first bone ceremony, and Soren to have his first fur ceremony, and Eglantine to have her first meat. Meat! I get to eat meat? Eglantine gave a little hop of excitement. She seemed to have forgotten all about the joys of centipedes. And so, Clud, when you want a vole all of your own, you can just go out and hunt it for yourself. I spent most of the night tracking down this one. Food is scarce in Tyto this time of year. I'm exhausted. A huge orange moon sailed in the autumn sky. It seemed to hover just above the great fir tree where Soren and his family lived, and it cast a soft glow through the opening of the hollow. It was indeed a perfect night for the ceremonies that these owls loved and that marked their growth in the passage of time. And so that night, just before the dawn, the three little owlets had their first meat, first fur, and first bone ceremony. And Clud yarped his first real pellet. It was the exact shape of his gizzard, which had pressed it into the tight little bundle of bones and fur. Oh, that's a fine pellet, son, Clud's father said. Yes, indeed, his mother agreed. Quite admirable. And Clud, for once, seemed satisfied, and Miss Plithiver thought privately to herself how no bird could be really bad that had such a noble digestive system. That night, from the time the big orange moon began to slip down in the sky until the first gray streaks of the new dawn, Noctis alba told the stories that the owls had loved to hear from the time of Glox. Glox was the most ancient order of owls from which all other owls descended. So his father began. Once upon a very long time ago, in the time of Glox, there was an order of nightly owls from a kingdom called Gahul, who would rise each night into the blackness and perform noble deeds. They spoke no words but true ones. Their purpose was to right all wrongs, to make strong the weak, mend the broken, vanquish the proud, and make powerless those who abuse the frail. With hearts sublime they would take flight. Clud yawned. Is this a true story or what, Da? It's a legend, Clud, his father answered. But is it true? Clud whined. I only like true stories. A legend, Clud, is a story that you begin to feel in your gizzard, and then over time it becomes true in your heart, and perhaps makes you become a better owl. Chapter 2. A Life Worth 2 Pellets. True in your heart. Those words in the deep, throaty hoot of his father were perhaps the last thing Soren remembered before he landed with a soft thud on a pile of moss. Shaking himself and feeling a bit dazed, he tried to stand up. Nothing seemed broken. But how had this happened? He certainly had not tried flying with his parents while his parents were out hunting. Good glocks, he hadn't even tried branching yet. He was still far from flight readiness, as his mum called it, so how had this happened? All he knew was one moment he was near the edge of the hollow, peering out, looking for his mum and dad to come home from hunting, and the next minute he was tumbling through the air. Soren tipped his head up. The fir tree was so tall, and he knew that their hollow was near the very top. What had his father said? 90 feet? 100 feet? But numbers had no meaning for Soren. Not only could he not fly, he couldn't count either. Didn't really know his numbers. But there was one thing that he did know. He was in trouble. Deep, frightening, horrifying trouble. The boring lectures that Clud had complained about came back to him. The weight of the terrible truth now pressed upon him in the darkness of the forest. Those grim words. An owlet that is separated from its parents before it has learned to fly and hunt cannot survive. And Soren's parents were gone on a long hunting flight. There had not been many since Eglantine had hatched out, but they needed more food, for winter was coming. So right now Soren was completely alone. He could not imagine being more completely alone as he gazed up at the tree that seemed to vanish into the clouds. He sighed and muttered, "So alone, so alone." And yet, deep inside him, something flickered like a tiny smoldering spark of hope. When he had fallen, he must have done something that his nearly bald wings that had captured the air, as his father would say. He tried now to recall that feeling. For a brief instant, falling had actually felt wonderful. Could he perhaps recapture that air? He tried to lift his wings and flutter them slightly. Nothing. His wings felt cold and bare in the crisp autumn breeze. He looked at the tree again. Could he climb using his talons and beak? He had to do something fast, or he would become some creature's next meal. A rat? A raccoon? Soren felt faint at the very thought of a raccoon. He had seen them from the nest. Bushy, masked, horrible creatures with sharp teeth. He must listen carefully. He must turn and tip his head as his parents had taught him. His parents could listen so carefully that from high above in their tree hollow they could hear the heartbeat of a mouse on the forest floor below. Surely he should be able to hear a raccoon. He cocked his head and nearly jumped. He did hear a sound. It was a small, raspy, familiar voice from high up in the tree. "Soren! Soren!" it called from the hollow where his brother and sister still nestled in the fluffy, pure white down that their parents had plucked from beneath their flight feathers. But it was neither Clud nor Eglantine. "Miss Plithiver," Soren cried. "Soren, are you alive? Oh dear, of course you are. If you can say my name, how stupid of me. Are you well? Did you break anything?" "I don't think so. But how will I ever get back up there?" Oh dears," Miss Plithiver moaned. She was not much good in a crisis. One could not expect such things of nestmaids, Soren supposed. "How long until Mum and Dad get home?" Soren called. "Oh, it could be a long while, dearie." Soren had hop-stepped to the roots of the tree that ran above the ground like gnarled talons. He could now see Miss Plithiver, her small head with its glistening rosy scales hovering over the edge of the hollow. Where Miss Plithiver's eyes should have been, there was 2 small indentations. "This is simply beyond me," she sighed. "Is Clud awake? Maybe he could help me?" There was a long pause before Miss Plithiver answered weakly. "Well, perhaps." She sounded hesitant. Soren could hear her now, nudging Clud. "Don't be grumpy, Clud. Your brother has taken a tumble, as it is." Soren heard his brother yawn. "Oh my," Clud sighed, and didn't sound especially upset, Soren thought. Soon the large head of his big brother peered over the edge of the hollow. His white heart-shaped face with the immense dark eyes peered down on Soren. "I say," Clud drawled, "you've got yourself in a terrible fix." "I know, Clud. Can't you help me? You know more about flying than I do. Can't you teach me?" "Me teach you? I wouldn't know where to begin. Have you gone yoiks?" He laughed. Stark raving yoiks. "Me teach you," he laughed again. There was a sneer embedded deep within the laugh. "I'm not yoiks. But you're always telling me how much you know, Clud." This was certainly the truth. Clud had been bragging about his superiority ever since Soren had hatched out. He should get the favorite spot in the hollow because he was already losing his downy fluff in preparation for his first flight feathers, and therefore he would be colder. He deserved the largest hunks of mouse meat because he, after all, was on the brink of flying. You've already had your first flight ceremony. Tell me how to fly, Clud. One cannot tell another how to fly. It's a feeling, and besides, it is really a job for Mum and Da. It would be very impertinent of me to usurp their position. Soren had no idea what usurp meant. Clud often used big words to impress him. What are you talking about, usurped? Sounded like yarp to Soren, but what would yarping have to do with teaching him to fly? Time was running out, the light was leaking out of the day's end, and the evening shadows were falling. The raccoons would soon be out. I can't do it, Soren, Clud replied in a very serious voice. It would be extremely improper for a young owlet like myself to assume this role in your life. My life isn't going to be worth 2 pellets if you don't do something. Don't you think it's improper for you to let me die? What will Mom and Dad say to this? I think they will understand completely. Great Glucks, understand completely. He had to be, yoicks. Soren was simply too dumbfounded. He could not say another word. I'm going to get help, Soren. I'll go to Hilda's, heard Miss P rasp. Hilda was another nest-made snake from an owl family in a tree near the banks of the river. I wouldn't if I were you, Miss P. Clud's voice was ominous. It made Soren's gizzard absolutely quiver. Don't call me that. That's so rude. Don't call me P. That's so rude. That's the last thing you have to worry about, P. Me being rude. Soren blinked. I'm going, Clud. You can't stop me, Miss Plithiver said firmly. Can't I? Soren heard a rustling sound above. Good Glocks, what's happening? Miss Plithiver. Only silence now. Miss Plithiver? Soren called again. Maybe she had gone to Hilda's. He could only hope and wait. It was nearly dark now, and a chill wind rose up. There was no sign of Miss Plithiver returning. First teeth, isn't that what Da always called these early cold winds? The first teeth of winter? The very words made poor Soren shudder. When his father had first used this expression, Soren had no idea what teeth even were. His father explained that they were something that owls didn't have, but most other animals did. They were for tearing and chewing food. Does Miss Plithiver have them? Asked Soren. Miss Plithiver had gasped in disgust. His mother said, Of course not, dear. Well, what are they exactly? Soren had asked. Said his mother as she thought for a moment. Just imagine a mouthful of beaks. Very sharp beaks. That sounds very scary. Yes, it can be, his mother replied. That is why you do not want to fall out of the hollow or try to fly before you're ready, because raccoons have very sharp teeth. You see, his father broke in, we have no need for such things as teeth. Our gizzards take care of all that chewing business. I find it rather revolting, the notion of actually chewing something in one's mouth. They say it adds flavor, darling, his mother added. I get flavor, plenty of flavor, in my gizzard. Where do you think that old expression, I know it in my gizzard, comes from? Or I have a feeling in my gizzard, Marilla. Noctis, I'm not sure if that is the same thing as flavor. That mouse we had for dinner last night. I can tell you from my gizzard exactly where he had been of late. He had been feasting on the sweet grass of the meadow mixed with the nudies from the little gahul tree that grow down by the stream. Great Glucks, I don't need teeth to taste. Oh dear, thought Soren. He might never hear this gentle bickering between his parents again. A centipede pittered by, and Soren did not even care. Darkness gathered, the black of the night grew deeper, and from down on the ground he could barely see the stars. This, perhaps, was the worst. He could not see the sky through the thickness of the trees. How much he missed the hollow. From their nest there was always a little piece of sky to watch. At night it sparkled with stars or raced with clouds. In the daytime there was often a lovely patch of blue, and sometimes toward evening, before twilight, the clouds turned bright orange or pink. There was an odd smell down here on the ground, damp and moldy. The wind sighed through the branches above, through the leaves and the needles of the forest trees, but down on the ground, well, the wind didn't seem to even touch the ground. There was a terrible stillness. It was the stillness of a windless place. This was no place for an owl to be. Everything was different. If his feathers had been even half-fledged, he could have plumped them up, and the downy fluff beneath the flight feathers would have kept him warm. He supposed he could try calling for Eglantine, but what use would she be? She was so young. Besides, if he called out, wouldn't that alert other creatures in the forest that he was here? Creatures with teeth? He guessed his life wasn't worth 2 pellets, but even worthless, he still missed his parents. He missed them so much that the missing felt sharp. Yes, he did feel something in his gizzard as sharp as a tooth. Chapter 3. Snatched. Soren was dreaming of teeth and of the heartbeats of mice when he heard the first soft rustlings overhead. "Ma? Dad?" he cried out in his half-sleep. He would forever regret calling out those 2 words, for suddenly the night was ripped with a shrill screech, and Soren felt talons wrap around him. Now he was being lifted, and they were flying fast, faster than he could think, faster than he could ever imagine. His parents never flew this fast. He had watched them when they took off or came back from the hollow. They glided slowly and rose into beautiful lazy spirals into the night. But now, underneath the earth raced by, slivers of air blistered his skin. The moon rolled out from behind thick clouds and bleached the world with an eerie whiteness. He scoured the landscape below for the tree that had been his home, but the trees blurred into clumps, and then the forests of the kingdom of Tyto seemed to grow smaller and smaller and dimmer in the night, until Soren could not stand to look down any more, so he dared to look up. There was a great bushiness of feathers on the owl's legs. His eyes continued upward. This was a huge owl, or was it even an owl? Atop this creature's head, over each eye, were 2 tufts of feathers that looked like an extra set of wings. Just as Soren was thinking this was the strangest owl he had ever seen, the owl blinked and looked down. Yellow eyes. He had never seen such eyes. His own parents and his brother and sister all had dark, almost black eyes. His parents' friends who occasionally flew by had brownish eyes, perhaps some with a tinge of tawny gold, but yellow eyes? This was wrong, very wrong. Surprised? The owl blinked, but Soren could not speak, so the owl continued. Yes, you see, that's the problem with the kingdom of Tyto. You never see any other kind of owl but your own, lowly, undistinguished barn owls. That's not true, said Soren. You dare to contradict me? Screeched the owl. I've seen grass owls and masked owls. I've seen bay owls and sooty owls. Some of my parents' very best friends are grass owls. Stupid, they're all Tytos, the owl barked at him. Stupid. Grown-ups weren't supposed to speak this way, not to young owls, not to chicks. It was mean. Soren decided he should be quiet. He would stop looking up. We might have a haggard here, he heard the owl say. Soren turned his head slightly to see who the owl was speaking to. Oh, great Glex, one wonders if it's worth the effort. The owl's eyes seemed more brown than yellow, and his feathers were spattered with splotches of white and gray and brown. Oh, I think it is always worth the effort, Gimble. And don't let Sporn hear you talking that way. You'll get a demerit, and then we'll all be forced to attend another one of his interminable lectures on attitude. This owl looked different as well, not nearly as big as the other owl, and his voice made a soft ting-ting sound. It was at least a minute before Soren noticed that this owl was also carrying something in his talons. It was a creature of some sort, and it looked rather owlish, but it was so small, hardly larger than a mouse. Then it blinked its eyes. Yellow! Soren resisted the urge to yarp. Don't say a word, the small owl said in a squeaky whisper. Wait. Wait for what? Soren wondered. But soon he felt the night stir with the beating of other wings. More owls fell in beside them. Each one carried an owlet in its talons. Then there was a low hum from the owl that gripped Soren. Gradually the other owls flanking them joined in. Soon the air thrummed with a strange music. It's their whispered the tiny owl. It gets louder. That's when we can talk. Soren listened to the words of the hymn. Hail to St. Igilus, our alma mater. Hail, our song we raised in praise of thee. Long in the memory of every loyal owl, thy splendid banner emblazoned be. Now to thy golden talons homage we're bringing, guiding symbol of our hope and fears. Hark to the cries of eternal praises ringing. Long may we triumph in the coming years. The tiny owl began to speak as the voices swelled in the black of the night. My first words of advice are listen rather than speak. You've already gotten yourself marked out as a wild owl, a haggard. Who are you? What are you? Why do you have yellow eyes? You see what I mean? That is the last thing you should worry about. The tiny owl sighed softly. But I'll tell you, I'm an elf owl. My name is Gilfeet. I've never seen one in Taito. We live in the high desert kingdom of Kunir. Do you ever grow any bigger? No, this is it. But you're so small, and you've got all your feathers or almost. Yes, this is the worst part. I was within a week or so of flying when I got snatched. But how old are you? 20 nights? 20 nights, Soren exclaimed. How can you fly that young? Elf owls are able to fly by 27 or 30 nights. How much is 66 nights? Soren asked. A lot. I'm a barn owl, and we can't fly for 66 nights. But what happened to you? How did you get snatched? Gilfy did not answer right away, then slowly. What is the one thing that your parents always tell you not to do? Fly before you're ready. Soren said. I tried, and I fell. But I don't understand. It would have been only a week, you said. Soren, of course, wasn't sure how long a week was, or how long 27 nights were, but it all sounded shorter than 66. I was impatient. I was well on my way to growing feathers, but had grown no patience. Gilfy paused again. But what about yourself? You must have tried it too. No, I don't really know what happened. I just fell out of the nest. But the second Soren said those words, he felt a weird queasiness. He almost knew. He just couldn't quite remember, but he almost knew how it happened, and he felt a mixture of dread and shame creep through him. He felt something terrible deep in his gizzard. Chapter 4. St. Agilus Academy for Orphaned Owls. The owls began to bank in steep turns as they circled downward. Soren blinked and looked down. There was not a tree, not a stream, not a meadow. Instead, immense rock needles bristled up, and cutting through them were deep stone ravines and jagged canyons. This could not be Taito. That was all that Soren could think. Down, down, down they plunged, in tighter and tighter circles, until they alighted on the stony floor of a deep, narrow canyon. And although Soren could indeed see the sky from which they had just plunged, it seemed farther away than ever. Above, there was the sound of wind, distant yet shrill as it whistled across the upper reaches of this harsh stone world. Then, piercing through the shriek of the wind, came a voice even louder and sharper. Welcome, owlets. Welcome to St. Agilus. This is your new home. It is here that you will find truth and purpose. Yes, that is our motto. From when truth is found, purpose is revealed. This immense, ragged, great-horned owl fixed them in her yellow gaze. The tufts above her eyes swooped up. The shoulder feathers on her left wing had separated, revealing an unsightly patch of skin with a jagged white scar. She was perched on a rock outcropping in the granite ravine where they had been brought. I am Skench, Albla Drenal of St. Agilus. My job is to teach you the truth. We discourage questions here as we feel they often distract from the truth. Soren found this very confusing. He had always asked questions ever since he had hatched out. Skench, the Alba General, was continuing her speech. You are orphans now. The words shocked Soren. He was not an orphan. He had a mom and a dad. Perhaps not here, but out there somewhere. Orphan meant your parents were dead. How dare this Skench, the owl blah 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 blah, or whatever she called herself, say he was an orphan? We have rescued you. It is here at St. at St. Aggie's that you shall find everything that you need to become humble, plain servants of a higher good. This was the most outrageous thing Soren had ever heard. He hadn't been rescued. He had been snatched away. If he had been rescued, these owls would have flown up and dropped him back in his family's nest. And what exactly was a higher good? There are many ways in which one can serve the higher good, and it is our job to find out which best suits you and to discover what your special talents are. Skench narrowed her eyes until they were gleaming amber slits in her feathery face. I am sure that each and every one of you has something special. At that very moment there was a chorus of hoots, and many owl voices were raised in song. To find one's special quality, one must lead a life of deep humility. To serve in this way, never question but obey, is the blessing of St. Aggie's charity. At the conclusion of the short song, Skench, the owl general, swooped down from her stone perch. She fixed them all in the glare of her eyes. You are embarking on an exciting adventure, little orphans. After I've dismissed you, you shall be led to one of 4 glossediums, where 2 things shall occur. You shall receive your number designations, and you shall also receive your first lesson in proper manner in which to sleep, and shall be included in the march of sleep. These are the first steps towards the specialness ceremony. What in the world was this owl talking about? Soren wondered. Number designation? What was a glossedium? And since when did an owl have to be taught to sleep? And a sleep march? What was that? And it was still night. What owl slept at night? But before he could really ponder these questions, he felt himself being gently shoved into a separate line from the little elf owl called Gylfie. He turned his head nearly completely around to search for Gylfie and caught sight of her. He raised a stubby wing to wave, but Gylfie did not see him. He saw her marching ahead with her eyes looking straight forward. The line Soren was in wound its way through the series of deep gorges. It was like a stone maze of tangled trails through the gaps and canyons and notches of this place called St. Aggie's Academy for Orphaned Owls. Soren had the unsettling feeling that he might never see the little elf owl again. And even worse, it would be impossible to ever find one's way out of these stone boxes into the forest world of Taito, with its immense trees and sparkling streams. They finally came to stop in a circular stone pit. A white owl with very thick feathers waddled toward them and blinked. Her eyes had a soft yellow glow. I am Finny, your pit guardian, and then she giggled softly. Some have been known to call me their pit angel. She gazed sweetly at them. I would love it if you would all call me Auntie. Auntie, Soren wondered. Why would I ever call her Auntie? But he remembered not to ask. I must, of course, call you by your number designation, which you shall shortly be told, said Finny. Oh, goody! A little spotted owl standing next to Soren hopped up and down. This time, Soren remembered too late that questions were discouraged. Why do you want a number instead of your name? Hortense. You wouldn't like that name either, the spotted owl whispered. Now shush, remember no questions. You shall, of course, Finny continued, if you are good humble owlets and learn the lessons of humility and obedience, earn your specialness rank, and then receive your true name. But my true name is Soren. It is the name my parents gave me. The words pounded in Soren's head, and even his gizzard seemed to tremble in protest. Now, let's line up for our number ceremony, and I have a tempting little snack here for you. There was perhaps 20 owls in Soren's group, and Soren was toward the middle of the line. He watched as the white owl, Auntie or Finny, whom Hortense had informed him was a snowy owl, dropped a piece of fur-stripped mouse meat on the stone before each owl in turn, and then said, Why, you're number 12-6. What a nice number that is, dearie. Every number was either nice or dear or darling. Finny bent her head solicitously and often gave a friendly little pat to the owlet just numbered. She was full of quips and little jokes. Soren was just beginning to feel that things perhaps could be worse, and he hoped that Gylfie had such a nice owl for a pit guardian, when the huge fierce owl with the tufts over each eye, the very one who had snatched him and called him stupid, alighted down next to Finny. Soren felt a cold dread steal over his gizzard as he saw the owl look directly at him and then dip his head and whisper something into Finny's ear. Finny nodded and looked at him blandly. They were talking about him, Soren was sure. He could barely move his talons forward on the hard stone toward Finny. His turn was coming up soon. Only 4 more owls before he would be numbered. "Hello, sweetness," Finny cooed as Soren stepped forward. "I have a very special number for you." Soren was silent. Finny continued, "Don't you want to know what it is? This is a trick. Questions are discouraged. I'm not supposed to ask." And that was exactly what Soren said. "I'm not supposed to ask." The soft yellow glow streamed from Finny's eyes. Soren felt a moment's confusion. Then Finny leaned forward and whispered to him, "No, dear, I'm not as strict as some, so please, if you really, really need to ask a question, just go ahead. But remember to keep your voice down. And here, dear, is a little extra piece of mouse and your number." She sighed, and her entire white face seemed to glow with yellow light. "My favorite, 12-1. Isn't that sublime? It's a very special number, and I'm sure that you will discover your own very specialness as an owl." "Thank you," Soren said, still slightly mystified, but relieved that the fierce owl had apparently not told Finny anything bad about him. "Thank you? What?" Finny giggled. "See, I get to ask questions, too, sometimes." "Thank you, Finny?" Finny inclined her head toward him again. There was a slight glare in her yellow glow. "Again," she whispered softly. "Again. Now look me in the eyes." Soren looked into the yellow light. "Thank you, Auntie?" "Yes, dear, I'm just old Broody. Love being called Auntie." Soren did not know what a Broody was, but he took the mouse meat and followed the owl who had been in front of him into the glossidium. 2 large, ragged brown owls escorted the entire group. The glossidium was a deep box canyon, the floor of which was covered with sleeping owlets. Moonlight streamed down directly on them, silvering their feathers. "Fall in, you two," barked a voice from high up in the rocky crevice. "You!" A plump owl stepped up to Soren. Indeed, Soren's heart quickened at first, for it was another barn owl, just like his own family. There was the white heart-shaped face and the familiar dark eyes, and yet although the color of these eyes was identical to his own and those of his family, he found the owl's gaze frightening. "Back row, and prepare to assume the sleeping position." These instructions were delivered in the throaty rasp common to barn owls, but Soren found nothing comforting in the familiar. The 2 owls who had escorted the newly arrived orphan spoke to them next. They were long-eared owls and had tufts that poked straight up over their eyes and twitched. Soren found this especially unnerving. Each alternated speaking in short, deep whoos. The whoos were even more disturbing than the barks of Skench earlier, from the sound seemed to coil in Soren's very breast and thrum with a terrible clang. "I am Jat," said the first owl. "I was once a number, but now I have earned my new name." Soren snapped off the word. "I see a question forming on your disgusting beak, number 12-1. The who thrummed so deep within Soren's breast that he thought his heart might burst. Let me make it perfectly clear. The thrumming of the owl's sound was almost unbearable. At St. Aggie's, such words beginning with the w sound are not to be spoken. Such words are question words, a habit of mental luxury and indulgence. Questions might fatten the imagination, but they starve the owlish instincts of hardiness, patience, humility, and self-denial. We are not here to pamper you by allowing an orgy of words, question words. They are dirty words, swear words, punishable by the most severe means at our disposal." Jack blinked and cast his gaze on Soren's wings. "We are here to make true owls out of you, and someday you will thank us for that." Soren thought he was going to faint with fear. These owls were so different from Finny. "Auntie," he silently corrected himself. Jat resumed speaking in his normal who. "Now my brother shall address you." It was an identical voice. "I am Jut. I, too, was once a number, but I have earned my new name. You are now in the sleeping position, standing tall, head up, beak tipped to the moon. You see in the glossidium hundreds of owlets. They have all learned to sleep in this manner. You, too, shall learn." Soren looked around, desperately searching for Gylfie, but all he saw was Hortense, or number 12-8. She had assumed the perfect sleeping position. He could tell by the stillness of her head that she was sound asleep under the glare of a full moon. Soren spotted a stone arch that connected to what he thought was another glossidium, A mass of owls seemed to be marching. Their beaks were bobbing open and shut, but Soren could not hear what they were saying. Jat now spoke again. It is strictly forbidden to sleep with the head tucked under the wings, dipped toward the breast, or in the manner that many of you young owls are accustomed, which is the semi-twist position in which the head rests on the back. Soren felt at least 7 woof sounds die mutely in his throat. Incorrect sleeping posture is also punishable, using our most severe methods. Sleep correction monitors patrol the Glossidium, making their rounds at regular intervals, Jut continued. Now it was Jat's turn. Their timing seemed perfect. Soren felt they had given this speech many times. Also, at regular intervals, you shall hear the alarm. At the sound, all owlets in the Glossidium are required to begin the sleep march. During the sleep march, Jut resumed, you march repeating your old name over and over and over again. When the second alarm sounds, you halt where you are, repeat your number designation 1 time, and 1 time only, and assume the sleeping position once more. Both owls next spoke at once in an awesome thrum. Now sleep. Soren tried to sleep. He really did try. Maybe Finny, he meant Auntie, would believe him. But there was just something in his gizzard, a little twinge, that seemed to make sleep impossible. It was almost as if the shine of the full moon that sprayed its light over half the Glossidium became a sharp silver needle stabbing through his skull and going straight to his gizzard. Perhaps he had a very sensitive gizzard like his da, but in this case he wasn't tasting the sweet grass the meadow mouse had feasted on. He was tasting dread. Soren was not sure how long it was before the alarm sounded, but it was soon time for his first sleep march. Repeating his name over and over, he followed the owls in his group and now moved into the shadow of the overhang of the arch. Ah, Soren sighed. The stabbing feeling in his skull ceased. His gizzard grew still, and Soren became more alert. The proper state for an owl who lived in the night. He looked about him. The little spotted owl named Hortense stood next to him. Hortense? Soren said. She stared at him blankly and began tapping her feet as if to move. The sleep monitor swooped down. What you marching in place for, 12-8? Assume the sleeping position. Hortense immediately tipped her beak up, her head slightly back, but there was no moon to shine down upon it in the shadow of the rock. Soren, also in the sleep position, slid his eyes toward her. Curious, he thought. She responded to her number name, but not her old name, except to move her feet. Still unable to sleep in this newfangled position, Soren twisted his head about to survey the stone arch. Through the other side of the arch, he caught sight of Gylfi, but too late. The alarm sounded, a high piercing shriek. Before he knew it, he was being pushed along as thousands of owls began to move. Within seconds, there was an indescribable babble of each owl repeating its old name over and over again. It became clear to Soren that they were following the path of the moon around the Glossidium. There were, however, so many owls that they could not all be herded under the full shine of the moon at the same time. Therefore, some were allowed an interview under the overhang of the rock arch. Perhaps he and Gylfi, since they wound up before at the arch at the same time, could meet there again. He was determined to get close to Gylfi the next time, but that would take 3 more times. 3 more times of blathering his name into the moonlit night. 3 more times of feeling this terrible twinge in his gizzard. 12-1, tip that beak up. It was a sleep monitor. He felt a thwack on the side of his head. Hortense was still next to him. She mumbled 12-8. What a lovely name that is. 12-8, perfect name. I love 2s and 4s and 8s. So smooth. Hortense, Soren whispered softly. Her talons might have just vaguely begun to stir on the floor, but other than that, nothing. Horty, he tried, but the little spotted owl was lost in some dreamless sleep. Finally, Soren was back under the arch and quickly moved over to the other side, which connected to the neighboring Glossidium. The sleep monitors had just barked out the command, "Now sleep!" Suddenly, Gylfi was there. The tiny elf owl swung her head towards Soren. "They're moon blinking us," she whispered. And that's where we will stop for the night. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. And I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends.